Welcome back to another episode of the Reckless Wrench Garage. I am Chris, and throughout this year, I've put out several videos covering the build of the shop that we're in now, and I want to answer the number one question that I get about the shop, and it's one that I had prior to building it, is how much does it cost to build your dream shop? So I'm gonna go over the process of how I built it, the different costs at certain stages, and the grand total at the very end of the video. All right, so you know you want to build a big shop and it's going to be massive and awesome and everything, but there's two questions that you have to answer before you get started. Number one, what is your maximum overall budget? Take that and then add like 10 to 15% to it because you probably are going to go over unless you have exorbitant amounts of money. And number two, what process do you want to use to build this building? And in my opinion, there's kind of three ways that you can go about it. The first one is you hire a contractor. You give him a chunk of money that he asks for, dimensions, areas, features, all that stuff, and then he makes it happen and does all of the legwork. Your second option is you become the contractor and you arrange and hire a builder. You get the concrete guy, you get the electrician, everyone that you're going to need to do this project, you're the one that's responsible for finding them and hiring them. So that's option two. Option three is you're the ultimate DIY person. Maybe you got some construction background, maybe you don't, and you decide to do everything yourself with your friends and go about it that way. Now, out of those three options, obviously hiring a contractor is the most expensive, and doing everything yourself initially might seem the cheapest route, but ultimately, you know, if you don't own the tools or have the knowledge or anything like that, you're gonna be paying in the long run. Option two, which is ultimately the one that I chose, you know, I contracted everyone out. I'm the one that hired everyone. It's a lot more time and legwork on your end of it. And especially if you're not in the construction industry and have those kinds of contacts, you don't always know what everyone's workmanship is. You might get higher prices than what a actual contractor is, someone that's going to be using them over and over again. Whereas, you know, me, I'm a one and done type of job. Other than I might have a couple references that come out of it. But those are some of the things you need to consider going into this. How do you want to do the build? With that being said, time to move on to the meat and potatoes, the big building. What do you want? Initially, when I was planning this shop build, I thought I wanted a 30 by 40, and that was gonna be a perfect size, and I didn't need anything bigger. My wife and I just laid out some rough dimensions with some marking flags and parked a couple vehicles on there, and quickly realized that we would use up the space that I initially planned for pretty quickly. So going bigger is definitely not gonna be a regret on your part if you do end up exceeding that area. I had my dimensions planned. I wanted a 30 by 60 and I wanted a 10-foot awning on the side so we could park under it, have a porch under it, you know, whatever you wanna do with it. The building is not one area where you want to cheap out. Get what you want, and I'm very happy with the building that we have. I contacted several builders, and I was getting quotes in the $85,000 up to $135,000 range for a turnkey building where I just gave them the dimensions and they came in and did the electrical and everything like that. All of those options exceeded my budget. I have a pole barn or post frame construction building, and as you guys saw in the videos I did, you know, they put big holes in the ground, put posts in it, and that is your foundation for it. There's other styles, so you have the all metal buildings. I looked at a multitude of these, and in general, I had almost, I think, 10 quotes for buildings before I selected the one I chose, but I looked at a lot of those metal buildings where they're put together with the galvanized metal that are welded. I wasn't really a fan of them for a couple reasons. A lot of them, I didn't like the construction on the inside of them. They seemed a little subpar for the price. The walls are not load bearing. So with this, I knew I wanted to build a mezzanine right from the very beginning. And I could not mount a mezzanine to one of those metal style buildings with the galvanized metal on the inside. Not to mention all of those metal building quotes I got to get them to the construction standards that this building is in were ranging between $40,000 and $55,000. That was not what I wanted to spend on the building alone. So what I ended up doing, I went to the pole style building, and it's a 30 by 60 with a 14-foot wall height, and it has a 10-foot porch on the side, a covered porch, and the building itself was $30,000, and that included 2 man doors. The roll-up doors, those are separate, and I'll talk about that later in the video. One thing I learned throughout this process in trying to figure out why some companies' quotes were higher or lower than the others, and that's the building features. And you could really deck these things out and add all sorts of things to them, but some very standard items that you need to look at and be aware of that I learned in this process is number one, the material thickness, especially on the metal. So the metal siding and the roof on this building that I have is 26 gauge, which I consider that to be the standard. There are some companies that will build it with 29 gauge metal on the roof and the sides, and to me that's and charge either the same amount or try to come in cheaper to get you to buy it. And in my opinion, you don't want that. Get the 26 gauge. This is not an area to cheap out on. You get to choose the color you're building, but the fasteners, make sure you get the color match fasteners. It's a little bit more money, but believe me, you don't want a red barn with some white or galvanized metal fasteners hanging out the side. Get the color match fasteners, it's worth it. And another thing that is not always a standard feature is the rat guard. And that's the guard that goes around the very bottom of the building, around the outside perimeter, to keep critters and dust, all that kind of stuff out, and it really makes a difference. Now, if you're just building like a livestock barn or something like that, no, it's not that big of a deal, but for an enclosed building like what I have here, you want the rat guard. Some places don't offer that as a standard feature. Make sure you look into that. All right, once I got the building selected and I knew my size and dimensions that I needed to get the area where it's gonna be built cleared off. Luckily, my yard is really flat. I needed to get a bulldozer to come in, really level it, and I needed to bring the grade down 4 inches so my building would match where my existing concrete was in the driveway. So I called probably 4 or 5 different contractors for the dirt work, and unfortunately, this is right around New Year's, so scheduling was very difficult, and people also during the holidays are busy, and they kind of charge more around that time, it seems like. I paid $2,000 for the dirt to get leveled, graded. They came in with some nice fill dirt or sand and really smoothed it over and had the pad ready and prepped. Again, this area is a big variable depending on how sloped your area is, what kind of prep work you need to do for the ground. I knew my electrical load going in was going to be high because I wanted a welder, outlet for air compressor, lots of outlets for tools all over the place. And I was able to present electricians with this and my ideas, and they were able to give me more accurate quotes. So keep that in mind going into this. The first part of the electrical process was getting the main panel set up in the shop. So this is a 100 amp panel, and it is from my main panel in the house. So I had to run it through the house and then underground into the shop. To do that with the breakers in the panel, it was $2,000, which to me, I was pretty happy with that because at my previous house, just to add a welding outlet and expand my panel in the garage, I had to pay over $1,000 for that. So I thought $2,000 was very affordable for the amount of work that I got done. Now that I got the rough electrical in and the trench was done, I could hire concrete guys. This is gonna be another area where we're gonna have to have some planning. Do you want a big lift in your shop? Are you gonna have huge heavy vehicles in your shop? How thick does your concrete need to be? Those are the kind of questions that you need to have answered before you start getting quotes. For 4-inch thick concrete for the shop, I was looking at about 6 1/4 to 650 a square foot. So to put 4-inch thick concrete in the shop and then the 10-foot porch on the side, it was $15,000 to get all that said and done. And that also included putting a drain in the floor. The next phase of my construction was the final electrical. So again, I already knew how many outlets I wanted. I knew exactly where I wanted them, and I knew about my lights, where I wanted those. I hired the same electrician again because I was really happy with his work, and I got another quote, and he came in and knocked out all of my outlets and lighting for $6,000. I put heavy-duty electrical outlets every 10 feet on the shop walls. They're the quad outlets, so I have tons of areas to plug stuff in. And I did 4 LED lights underneath the mezzanine and then 8 high bay lights on the ceiling. So some things that you gotta consider that are gonna bump up the price of your electrical work. The bigger the building, the more wire, the more it's gonna cost. So I put an outlet for the welder and for the air compressor at the opposite side of the main panel. So that costs more money to run that wire there, but those are things that you need to consider, when you're laying out your building plans. The next area is gonna be the doors. My building came with the man doors, the entry doors, but the garage doors were left open, so you choose your own. Some buildings, they come with them, but you need to be worried about those because they could be some really chintzy, just metal roll-up doors that are really crappy. I looked at some of them and they would not last or hold up over time. So be aware of that. I really wanted to save money in this area and do the doors myself. It kind of wasn't feasible just because I have a 12 by 12 door on the front. The size of that alone and the weight of it would be too much for me to do by myself. I'd have to rent equipment and get help for it. I looked at purchasing the doors separately and then hiring someone to do it, but getting the doors here would have been a nightmare because of how big they are. It would have to be freight, you'd have to have a forklift to unload them, and none of that stuff was really feasible on my end. So I just had to completely hire out the doors from a door company. I have the 12 by 12 roll-up door in the front and then a 7 by 7 in the back. And I also paid extra for the insulation and the brush guards on them, which I recommend doing that just to help seal up your building. And I have the electrical opener on the front and a chain hoist on the back. So with the install, it was $9,000 for the doors. And that cost a lot more than I was expecting them to. So that was one of the areas where my budget I didn't expect it, and my budget exceeded a lot in that area. So something to look out for. But again, the doors that's the entry point. You're gonna use them a lot and they keep your building secure. Just things to keep in mind. I don't recommend cheaping out in that area. And then the final major chunk of the construction project is getting the building insulated. You know, this is gonna be optional depending on where you live and what you're using it for. For me, this is not an option because this is Texas and it gets hot as heck in the summertime, so any sort of relief from the heat I could get, I'm going to do. I did a 1-inch closed cell through the whole building and on the roof. If you're going to be heating or cooling your building, you'll probably want to do 2-inch. But again, I got multiple quotes ranging from $7,500 all the way up to $9,000. And the contractor that I chose, it was $8,000 is what it cost me. That's all the items for putting the building together and having a structure as you see it here. I did build the mezzanine myself, which a lot of people saw that video. Everyone's gonna finish out the interior of the building a different way. The mezzanine, so it is 10 feet wide and like 8 feet tall, I think, and I built the stairs and the closet and all that too. That was $2,500 for me to purchase all the lumber, the hardware, and I bought like the impact drill from Milwaukee to get all that done. To recap everything, here's our grand total. We had $30,000 for the building, $2,000 for the dirt work, $15,000 for the concrete. The first run with the electrical was $2,000, and then I had $9,000 for the doors, $6,000 for the final electrical and all my outlets and all that. Insulation was $8,000 and the mezzanine was $2,500. So that brings the grand total for this building to $74,500 is what it cost me to build. I definitely feel like I saved money in the long run as opposed to hiring one of the contractors, because none of the contractors came in anywhere near kind of where I did it, and I got to choose my building as I put it together. Another benefit of doing it like this is, you know, rather than having to pay a builder a huge chunk up front, I was able to hire this guy here this month, another month later, hire another guy, another month later, purchase this. So it kind of helped me spread out my costs throughout, you know, the 5 or 6 months that I was building this thing. I'm not rich, so it helped me make it affordable, really. That's it for this episode. For any of you guys out there building a shop or wanting to build a shop, I really hope this information helped you. I know prior to me diving headfirst into this, I looked for as much information as I could about costs, methods, designs, all that stuff. So hey, if I helped you in that aspect, hit that like button and drop a comment down below on what you're planning on building or what your dream shop is. Anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you in the next episode. And until next time, stay reckless.